In the ancient lands of Israel, where dust hung in the air like forgotten memories and the earth was littered with the bones of past wars, there arose a man whose name would echo across generations. Samson. He was a paradox of divine favor and human weakness, a titan born to humble beginnings but destined for a tragic fall. His tale is one of strength, love, betrayal, and ultimately redemption. The rise of Samson. It all began long before Samson's birth, in a time when Israel was under the oppressive rule of the Philistines. The Israelites cried out to God for deliverance, and in response, a barren woman from the tribe of Dan was visited by an angel. He told her she would conceive a son, a special child who would be dedicated as a Nazirite from birth. This meant that he would never cut his hair, touch anything unclean, or consume wine, for he was chosen by God to deliver Israel from the Philistines. The woman gave birth to a son and named him Samson. From a young age, it was clear that Samson was no ordinary child. The Spirit of the Lord stirred within him, and he grew into a man of immense strength, unmatched by any warrior in the land. He was a giant in power, a symbol of Israel's hope and God's favor. The Philistines feared him even before they understood the full extent of his abilities. When Samson was a young man, he traveled to Timnah, a Philistine town, and saw a woman who captivated his heart. Her beauty overwhelmed him, and he desired to marry her, despite his parents' protests. They reminded him of the women within his own people, but Samson's desire for the Philistine woman was unshakable. They agreed, unaware that his union was part of God's plan to create conflict between Samson and the Philistines. As Samson made his way to Timnah for the wedding, a lion leaped out from the vineyards, roaring and ready to kill. But Samson, filled with the Spirit of the Lord, tore the beast apart with his bare hands, as if it were nothing more than a young goat. His strength was otherworldly, and yet he told no one of his feat. Days later, on his return journey, Samson found the carcass of the lion, filled with bees and honey. He scooped the honey into his hands and ate, tasting both sweetness and irony, for the honey came from the very symbol of his triumph. At the wedding feast, a celebration typical of the Philistines, Samson posed a riddle to 30 Philistine guests. Out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. If they could solve the riddle, he would give them 30 fine garments. If they could not, they owed him the same. The Philistines, frustrated and desperate, coerced Samson's new wife into prying the answer from him. After days of her relentless pleading, Samson relented and told her the secret, which she in turn revealed to the Philistines. When the Philistines answered his riddle correctly, Samson was filled with fury. He knew they had cheated, and in his anger, he went to the nearby town of Ashkelon, killed 30 men, and took their garments to pay his debt. This act marked the beginning of Samson's war with the Philistines. Enraged, he abandoned his wife and returned to his father's house. The war with the Philistines. The Philistines, humiliated and seeking revenge, took Samson's wife and gave her to another man. When Samson learned of this betrayal, he burned with anger. He caught 300 foxes, tied their tails together in pairs, and fastened torches between them. Then he set them loose in the Philistines' fields, vineyards, and olive groves, burning their crops to the ground. The Philistines retaliated by burning Samson's wife and her father alive. This drove Samson to a new level of fury, and he vowed to take his revenge. He slaughtered many Philistines with his bare hands and then retreated to a cave in the rock of Etam. The Philistines demanded that the Israelites hand Samson over to them. Fearful of their oppressors, 3,000 men of Judah went to Samson and pleaded with him to surrender. Samson agreed, but only if they promised not to kill him themselves. They bound him with new ropes and delivered him to the Philistines. As the Philistines approached, shouting in triumph, The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon Samson. He snapped the ropes as if they were nothing more than threads, and finding the jawbone of a donkey nearby, he used it as a weapon to strike down 1,000 Philistine men. Bloodied and exhausted, Samson stood victorious over a field of bodies, and with the jawbone still in his hand, he declared, "With a donkey's jawbone, I have made donkeys of them. With a donkey's jawbone, I have killed 1,000 men." The Fall of Samson. For years, Samson continued to be a thorn in the side of the Philistines, wreaking havoc and maintaining his status as Israel's champion. But Samson, despite his divine strength, had a fatal weakness: his love for women, especially Philistine women. This weakness would ultimately lead to his downfall. In the valley of Sorek, Samson met Delilah, a woman of breathtaking beauty and cunning charm. The Philistine rulers, desperate to defeat Samson, offered Delilah an immense sum of silver to discover the secret of his strength. Delilah, driven by greed, agreed to betray him. Night after night, Delilah pressed Samson to reveal the source of his strength. At first, Samson toyed with her, giving her false answers. He told her that if he were bound with fresh bowstrings, he would lose his strength. But when the Philistines came to capture him, Samson easily broke free. Delilah persisted, honeyed words like poison, and Samson, weary of her constant questioning, finally succumbed to her pleas. He revealed the truth, that his immense strength came from his uncut hair, a symbol of his Nazirite vow to God. Delilah waited until Samson fell asleep, and then she called for a man to shave off his 7 braids. As his hair fell away, so did the Spirit of the Lord that empowered him. When the Philistines returned, Samson awoke, thinking he could shake them off as before, but his strength was gone. The Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and dragged him to Gaza, where they set him to work, grinding grain in the prison. Samson's Redemption. The Philistines believed they had finally defeated the mighty Samson. They celebrated their victory with a great feast in honor of their god, Dagon. Thousands gathered in the temple to rejoice, and in their revelry they called for Samson to be brought out to entertain them. Blind, broken, and humiliated, Samson was led into the temple. But during his captivity, his hair had begun to grow again, and with it, his strength began to return. As Samson stood between the pillars of the temple, he prayed to God one last time. "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." With a mighty heave, Samson pushed against the central pillars that supported the temple. The building shook and the stone began to crack. With all his remaining strength, Samson brought the temple down upon the Philistine rulers and all who were gathered there, killing more in his death than he had in his life. Thus ended the life of Samson, a man of immense power but profound flaws. His story serves as a reminder that even the greatest of men can fall, yet redemption is always within reach for those who turn to God. Though Samson's fall was tragic, his final act of sacrifice ensured that Israel would be free from Philistine oppression, if only for a time. If you enjoyed that video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and we shall see you in the next video. What Bible character do you want us to talk about next? Noah? Jonah? Or something more from the New Testament? See you next time.